You know, I tend to think of the amplifier as being another instrument, you know, or part of the same whole thing as the electric guitar. You know, like we can judge guitars perhaps on how they sound acoustically, electric guitars, but ultimately their personality only comes through in combination with the amp. You know, different amps can color the guitar sound in different ways. And this particular amp is one that I've grown to love more and more as I've played it. It's the opposite of like a neutral pedal platform. It's absolutely full of like personality and attitude and purpose, you know, because this amp was developed to be a touring musician's rig. It's developed for one person. And what's really cool about that, the fact that Aynsley Lister, you know, had this along with Chris at Rift, you know, idea, and it came into fruition, that means it's a really strong personality, because it's not meant to be all things to all people, but what it does do is something really special. And in this video, there's not going to be a lot of talking, really. I've made reviews of this, and you can look back through the channel. I've made reviews, I've used it in loads of videos and talked about it a lot before. So this is a 35 watt amp that uses EL34 power tubes, and it's based on a Marshall amp, some particular ones that Aynsley Lister had himself, or still has, that have reverb in. So what you've got here is a 4-band EQ, that's bass, mid, treble and presence. And very importantly for a lot of us, you've got a preamp volume control and a master volume control. And then you've got your reverb. One sort of hidden feature in the preamp control is when it's pushed in default position, there's a sort of bright cap, I guess, bright switch. When you pull it out, that's taken away and the output drops a little bit as well. And actually in one of the clips in here, I've had to pull that out, so I'll explain why. So this is a really unusual SG, I think, and I've had quite a few people comment on the way it sounds. And I don't want to bring out too much wildness or like upper mids that are classic to SGs with this guitar, because it has a different character to it. I can't easily explain it other than how you heard it sounding. But what I find great with this guitar and this amp is I've rolled back that preamp a little bit compared to how I normally play it and turned up the master volume. I wanted to keep the tone a little bit less broken up. And that way the guitar's character that I can hear from other amps as well comes through. It's like poised and it doesn't break up too much. It's not too wild, and it's not just a wall of sound. You know, there's a real sort of, I don't know, to me it's a real 60s character that comes through. This is a 64 Reissue SG. And actually today was the first time I think I've ever plugged this into this amp and loved it. So yeah, I'll be doing that again. So this is the only sort of non-vintage style guitar that I've got, really. And so I don't connect it so much to a specific thing compared to other instruments, which I have preconceived ideas. I just want to hear what this guitar sounds like. And it's generally beautiful, clear, sort of very balanced, but with a good bottom end, you know. And it's just, for a PRS, to me, it's got a lot of character. Sort of like like an angelic character. So it's just a lovely sounding guitar. And what I did with the amp today was just dialed it in as I would normally, and then rolled back a little bit on these volumes. I wanted to see how it would interact, and it worked really well. I wanted to make this sort of chordal sort of music, and the amp's harmonics are just beautiful. But I like the speaker in there because it holds together so well. So whether I'm playing sort of big cleans, inverted commas cleans, it's, you know, it's not the cleanest sound, or something more like a you know, like hard rock at Les Paul style, which you'll hear later, the amp never falls apart. It doesn't flub out, and it can hold these like incredible harmonics from note to note. So yeah, this sounds really special in this amp. Okay, this is a broadcaster that's tuned down a lot, and it's got heavy strings on. These are baritone strings. It's tuned down to about B standard. And I wasn't sure, because not all of my amps can cope with those low notes on this. I wasn't sure how it was going to cope. And the thing about these broadcasters, they've got really sort of big, hot pickup in that bridge position. And I wasn't sure how the amp would go from that searing high to that big low. And I loved it. I just think it worked really well. And the amp is so dynamic. So when you're using your thumb to pick bass notes, you can be quite gentle if you want, or quite heavy, and it just really comes through in the playing. This amp has a really visceral quality. So, I mean, you have to be a bit careful when you play in some ways. It's not the most unforgiving amp by far. Some of the two rocks are quite unforgiving and actually remove some of the fun. This amp never does that. It's engaging and sort of interactive. But yeah, I was impressed with how it coped. Well, these days, Aynsley Lister is predominantly a Strat player. And so I imagine in the development of this amp that the Strat was used heavily. And it was funny because I was chatting to him the day before I made this video and I said, yeah, I don't really use Strats in this amp. I really love it for humbuckers. And so I probably hadn't used a Strat in it for ages. And then I plugged this in and realized that, yeah, of course it was designed with a Strat in mind. Now, this is a boutique built Strat. It's a case guitars and it's got Foley pickups in. They're really glassy and the whole thing has that early 60s sound and character, but a bit emphasized, you know, glassiness, very SRV sort of style. Here is where I think more than anything the amp's character comes through. There's so much going on when you hear the guitar. There's no overdrive pedals here, don't forget. It's just the amp. There's so much going on there coming through. It makes it a joy to play. It inspires you. I've recorded 6 clips today, all of them with a different improvised thing. And often I find that really difficult to play something different. And today I hope you've heard that it's all pretty different to each other. It's inspired me. I probably sat for 3 or 4 minutes with each guitar before I recorded and then just played. And that's what a great combination or a great amp can do. One that is engaging to play and isn't really that hard to set up. You don't have to do a lot to set this up, to be honest. It will tweak and work to dial into anywhere. I was saying a minute ago how this amp can dial in a tone, you know, it doesn't matter the room or what setting you're in because it's made to do that. I remember Aynsley told me a story, I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this, where he was playing somewhere and he just was having some sort of tone crisis. I don't know how long ago this was, before this amp. And he wasn't really a big pedal user, but had a Klon Centaur sitting at home, an original one. And asked his wife if she wouldn't mind flying it out so he could fix this tone problem that he was having. I don't know what was going on exactly, but clearly Aynsley has made sure that this amp will work with any guitar, anytime. But in particular, I found it easiest to dial in the Strat, the Paul Reed Smith, that ES-335. The SG, I went for something different, and I found that really interesting. The Telecaster was great. I mean, the sort of upper mids, and then the searing highs, and then the big lows from those low notes was great. This was the only guitar I had any issue with at all, and it wasn't necessarily to do with the amp. This guitar, it's quite, what's the word? It's very balanced, maybe a little bit flat across. And as I was dialing it in, different parts were getting accentuated by the amp that I wasn't used to hearing. The bright cap in the amp is default on, so I ended up pulling that out to get rid of that. And then I think I then turned the presence up to sort of counteract that a little bit. And in the end, came up with this sound which I thought was really great because I like this mid-gain classic rock sound, but it's got character. It's not just a wall of sound. You know, you can still hear the strings, you can still hear all of that going on. So ultimately, even though this guitar is it's the only guitar that's ever given me pause for thought with this amp. But the fact that I could still fix it on the fly, you know, within a minute. I'm not talking about, you know, brain surgery here. But that tells you, you know, this amp can deal. I played my baritone through it. I played almost every guitar in this room through it, often in just the same setting, and it always sounds great. So it's hard to put a title on videos like this. You know, I've done the review of this before. I've talked about it in other videos, and I still had more that I wanted to show. And, you know, I wanted to also explore for myself, you know, in one day, in a recording scenario, you know, different guitars. How easy is it to sort of set this up and use it? And it gives you it's very cleverly thought out, this amp. It has, between the bright cap being on and off, between the preamp and master volume, and then really useful ranges of EQ here. You know, it's also like set in places that you want, that you don't end up moving it around a lot. Maybe a really bassy guitar, you take out a bit of bass. You know, if something's really trebly, you just remove a bit, but it never seems to be too extreme. And then, despite, you know, you'd have thought you'd have needed a deeper combo. I mean, this is, you know, it's not a small amp, it's quite a big amp, but it's one of those shapes a bit like the Vibrolux, which is sort of narrower. You'd think the reverb wouldn't be able to do what it does, but it's just gorgeous, and it's never too much and it's never too little, and it works. So, of course, I'm waxing lyrical about this amp. It's one of my favourite that I've ever tried of many. It's in that top 3 for sure, along the Two Rock TS1 and maybe, I don't know what other ones, but yeah, probably in the top 2 then. So, are there any downsides? Only one I can think of is, if you're pushing it hard, you will hear a bit of buzzing. You know, this is an EL-34 amp. It's got some oomph behind it. In a live setting, you just wouldn't hear it with a band. It's not that loud. And in recording, I can normally dial it out somehow, you know, just pull back a little bit more on the preamp or whatever I need to do. It's not been a problem for me. I've known a few other people have asked me, quite a few other people, because you might hear a little bit in the background. It's not too bad. Can you play this at bedroom volumes? Yeah. Would I buy it for that? I mean, if you want to buy an incredible amp, and whatever amp you have, you're not going to be able to use it to its potential, then that argument isn't valid, really. Have whatever amp you want. I mean, I know the Two Rock TS1 does bedroom volumes. Yeah, you won't get everything out of this amp. You won't feel the air behind you, but it's still going to give you a lot. So yeah, it does work really at any volume. That master volume is really fantastic. And as you've heard, I hope you've heard, without any pedals, this amp can do everything I need apart from delay and fuzz. So I hope you've enjoyed that. It was just I just wanted to sort of show you how much I like this amp and what it can do. So I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.